Hi there. So today we're going to pick up where we left off from the first video, and we're going to start by making some buttons. So there are three types of elements that can be made to look like buttons within Bootstraps, and those are links, buttons, and input fields. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and delete some of this placeholder text in here just so I can have a little bit shorter of a space to work on. So let me open up I'm just going to grab this whole paragraph tag and delete it. There we go. Keep my hello world down here, but I'm going to go ahead then and bring in my first, which is the link. So I'm going to go ahead and create my link, ahref equals #, and I'm going to set the role to being button. And I'm going to type in the word link. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create using the button tag, which is the preferred way of creating a button, and set the type to being submit. And write down button. And then last is going to be the input. I'm going to set the type to being submit. And I'm going to set the value to being input. Okay. Go ahead and save that. Take a look here. And I can see there's my link, there's the button, and there's the input. So these are kind of default button things without any styling. Let's go ahead and put in some styling to make these look mostly similar. So then in my in my link here, I'm going to go ahead and set the class to being btn primary. Save that. You can see that that styled that up to look like a primary button. And then within my button, I'm also going to set that same class. So I'm going to set the class of btn primary. And then the same for our input field, setting the class to being btn, which is abbreviation of button, btn, and primary. Save that. And there you go. I have three buttons that look pretty much the same. However, they have a little bit different meaning. It's worth noting that only button elements are going to work within a nav or navbar component. So let's go ahead and work with some contextual classes here. I'm going to go ahead and just put in a line break real quick, and I'm going to type in my contextual classes. Then an H2 tag here. There we go. And I'm going to show you the difference in the different buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and create my button. And I'm going to give it a class of btn primary, btn primary. And in there I'm just going to write primary so that we know that one's already a blue color. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that whole thing. And I'm going to create a new button here, and I'm going to change this one to being success. So this one is success, which is a green color. This one is going to be info. This one is going to be warning, which is an orange color. And the last contextual class is danger, which is a red color. So then when I save this, you can see here are my contextual classes for my button: primary, success, info, warning, and danger. Now, when you use those different contextual classes, they tend to have some meaning associated with them. So whether or not you're giving somebody some information, your primary buttons, if they're in a warning or danger action situation on your site, you can imply those classes above and beyond just their color value. You can also change their color within your CSS. So now let's go ahead and look at some button sizes. Let's run a quick break tag here, and I'm going to put in another H2. And in there, I'm going to set button sizes. And I'm going to create my button with a class of BTN, BTN primary, and then BTN LG for a large button. This is going to be large. The next is going to be button with a class of BTN, BTN primary, BTN small, SM for small. And then the last one is going to be the button with a class of BTN, BTN primary, BTN block. And that is our block level button. So if I save that, now I can see here's my different buttons. Here's a large button, a small button, and then a button that fits at the block level. So that goes the entire width of the container itself that it is in. And those, again, you can adjust per the size of the container as well, or if you add in column classes too as well. All right, so now that we've got our buttons in here, let's go ahead and work with a table. So I'm going to go ahead and create, after the end of my fluid width container, I'm going to go ahead and create a new container here in a new row that's going to contain my my table here. So I'm going to create a div. I'm going to give it a class of container. Within there, I'm going to create my new div with a class of row. And then within that row, I'm going to go ahead and let me comment some of this out, so just to keep myself organized. So end of row. And then I need to create my end of container. There we go. So within this row, I'm going to go ahead and create my table. So I'm going to create a new table tag. And within that table tag, I'm going to create my table row. And within the table row tag, I'm going to create a table head tag. Within that table head tag, I'm just going to give it a name of header 1. And I'm going to copy that and paste it a couple times. Just change it to header 1, 2, 3. Organize this just a little bit here so it looks a little bit better. And then after this table row, I'm going to go ahead and create my table data section. I'm going to just write data 1, copy that, paste it, and just change it to data 1, 2, 3. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Oops, I almost forgot. I got to put in another row. Totally skipped it. Need my table row to wrap around here. There we go. That didn't look right. All right, now I can take this whole table row section and I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to paste it 5 more times just so that I have enough data to see how this table is looking. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now I can see here is my with no classes added to it, no Bootstrap classes. This is my table. So now let's go ahead and add in the class of table into our table tag. So table with a class of table. I'm going to save that. And you see that automatically adds in some nice padding, some nice styling to that, so everything is spread out into the container itself. And this is in a fixed width container. You can add some additional class elements to your table to adjust the styling. So this is all some default styling. So if you would like it to be striped, you just within that class add table striped. And that will give you a really nice striped table here. You can add a border to it by adding the class of table bordered. And that gives you this little half a pixel or 1 pixel border all the way around. You can also add a hover class to it as well, so you can have it set to table hover. I'm going to take the stripe off and change this to table hover. So now if I hover over anything, it will light up, so you can see what data I'm on. You can also make your table dark by adding in the class of table dark. So I'm going to change this to table dark. Save that, and I see I've got a nice dark table and the hover class on there as well. You can adjust the table head colors by adding the class of T head dark or T head light. So if I want to adjust this, I can change. So I can adjust the table head by adding to a light color by adding in the class of T head light. So that changes this. So this is now a light header with a dark table. I can change this the other way and make my table itself light and the table head to have a dark color too. And that will swap up my color arrangement as well. So you can make the table smaller by cutting the cell padding in half. So you can set the table to being a table small, SM, and that will cut some of that padding in half. So you see that's a much smaller table. So if you wanted it to appear a little bit different, you can add contextual colors as well to the row or table data cells by adding different classes to them. So if I want to take this first row, I can add in a class of active. And I can add in, you can add in contextual colors to table row or table data cells by adding classes to them as well. So for this table row, I'm going to add in a class of table active. You can see that that's going to make that a green color. I could change this in this particular table data cell into being a class of table success, and that will highlight just that one piece of the table. So you can adjust the coloring either to a row or just to the individual table data cells themselves. Tables can be made more responsive if they're placed within a container with a class of table responsive. So I'm going to go ahead and paste or change this container to being a div with the class of table responsive, and save that. And now that's going to respond to, you see how that changes that padding? So if I want that to be a little bit different, I'm going to go ahead and change this back to a container. Save that, and then I can put everything inside a new div in that row with a class of table responsive. Comment that, end of responsive table. And I will wrap that ending tag, cut that, and wrap that all the way around my table. And save that, and So that's going to change how that is, but now you're going to see that this is going to get responsive once it hits a small enough size. It may not get that small of a size, it will start to, you will get a scroll bar. So, and you can see that that eliminates at that smallest size, it's eliminating that padding. So it's now a much more responsive table. So let's work on adding some image classes. Within my document, at the end of my row here, I'm going to go ahead and create a new row. So I'm going to create a new div with a class of row. I'll comment that out for myself as well. End of row. And inside of this, I'm going to create a new section. And I'm going to give it the class of COL SM4. And inside that section, I'm going to go ahead and place an image. So I'm going to source my image out of my images folder. Just going to grab that background image again. I'm going to give it an alt tag of background image. How about just image, since it's not a background? There we go. I'm going to go ahead and test that. And there you can see there's my great big picture. So then, to adjust this image, before the alt tag, I'm going to go ahead and add in my class. So I'm going to set this to a class of IMG fluid. And save that. And now we see that that is responding. So at this small size, it is now the 4-column width that it's supposed to be. To center your image within a block display, we're going to go ahead and adjust some of the classes that we've already done. So I'm going to remove the class of IMG fluid. I'm going to change the class to read MX Auto, which means that MX stands for margin right and left. So margin right is MR, margin left is ML, so MX is both margin right and left, setting the margins to auto. And then period D, which stands for display block. Then I'm just going to I'm going to write a style tag here that's going to just restrict the width and the height of the image to being 50% since it's a pretty large image. Height is also going to be 50%. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove this. I'm just going to comment out really quick this section tag because that's going to adjust that. It's going to affect that centering due to, let me comment out this bottom one as well. Just, it's, since it has the column class on it, it'll go ahead and it will affect the centering of our image. So then when I save it here, you see that that image is centered and it's set to that default 50% size. So it is responding with, so you can add some styling to the pictures by working with the classes to either round the corners, round the image into a full circle, or turn it into a thumbnail. So the first one is just round the corners is within that class for the image. I'm just going to type in rounded. Save that, and you can see that just gives a nice little round to the corners. I can change it to be a circle, and it only really works to make a perfect circle if the image is already a perfect square. If it is a rectangle, it's going to turn into an oval, but that class is rounded circle. So when I save that, there's my nice oval because this is not a perfect circular image. Or I can turn it into a thumbnail by giving it the class of IMG thumbnail. And then that puts this little white border around everything, so it kind of looks like a Pinterest type of image. So those are the three different ways that you can adjust. To create a new basic form within working in the Bootstrap framework, it just requires some of the following Bootstrap classes. So after our centered image here, we're just going to go ahead and create a new div. We're going to go give that a class of container. And within this class, or within this div, I'm going to go ahead and create an h2 tag and give it the label of stacked form. I'm going to give it a form action. This isn't really linked to anything. So if you wanted to actually link it to an action within your database or anything like that, it would go there. And then I'm going to create a new div with the class of form group. Inside this form group, I'm going to go ahead and create the two items we need, the label and the input for our form. So I'm going to create the label tag, and that's going to be for an email. And set that to read email. And then I'm going to create my input. And that type is set to email. Give it a class of form control. An ID of email. And then I'm going to write the placeholder text is going to read enter email. And then the name is going to be email. Here we go. Go ahead and remove some of that extra spacing here, and we'll go ahead and save that. And then we'll see here is our label and then our input field here. So let's go ahead and create another form group for the password. So after the end of that div for the form group, I'm going to go ahead and create another div, and I'm going to give it a class of form group. And I'm going to set the label for PWD for the password. I'm going to set that to read password. And then I'm going to set the input the type is going to be password. The class is going to be form control. The ID is going to be PWD because that needs to match the label. The placeholder is going to read password. And then the name is going to be PSD. And I'll go ahead and save that, and you can see there's my second form there so that I could actually start typing. And when I set that to being a password, you can see that it, no matter what I type, it's filling in those little stars versus, or the little bullets instead of, here's my, if I was actually typing in an email. So you can see the difference there in those form fields. All right, so let's go ahead and place in a little checkbox after this. So after the ending of this form group here, we're going to go ahead and create another div. And we're going to give it a class of form check, since it's going to be a checkbox. Now inside there, we're going to create a label, and that's going to have a class of form check label. So form dash check dash label. That's kind of a long class. Open that up there, and then I'm going to put in my input and have that read. It's going to have a class of form check input. And that type is going to be set to checkbox. And the name is going to be remember. And then that's going to read remember me. Ideally, you'd have something that would remember the user. All right. Then after the ending of that label, I'm going to create another new label. And that is going to be for a select one. So we'll have our select one. And then I'm going to create my selection here. So I'm going to create a select tag with a class of form control. An ID of select one, so that'll match our label. So that needs to be case specific, so make sure that your ID is also matching your for. And then inside of that select tag, I'm going to create a new option tag, and that will say choose ... And then underneath there, I'm going to create another new option. So create another option tag, and this will read option one. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. So highlight and copy option one, and then I'm going to create option 2, 3, and 4. Up so they look a little bit better. There we go. All right, so outside of our form check area here, but still within the actual form itself, I'm going to create a button. So I'm going to create that tag for button. The type is going to be submit. The class is going to be BTN primary. And that's going to be the submit button. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then I'm going to check out my form here. So I've got the, select one must have gotten out on the wrong spot here. But you can see I have my drop down here, my email, my password, and my submit button. So let me go ahead here and fix that select one. So that's going to go, so that needs to just drop down another line and not be right next to the remember me. So I'm going to go ahead and move the select one down a line. So I'm just going to locate my checkbox here, and I'm just going to put in a little break tag here just to break that, save that, and then that jumps down a line. If I wanted it a little further, I could also put in some margin towards the bottom to space that out a little bit better. But this is just kind of a quick and dirty way, so that way you can see the difference here for some of the basic forms that you can create in Bootstrap. To work with checkboxes and radio buttons, it's some of the same classes we used for our forms, but we're going to make a more specific list of checkboxes and radio buttons. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and write the following simple checkbox form, and we're going to make the last option a disabled checkbox. So to start out, I'm going to create a form tag. Inside this form, I'm going to create a div with the class of form check. Inside that div, I'm going to create a label with the class of form check label. Inside that label, I'm going to create an input. The type is going to be checkbox. The class is going to be form check input. So form check input. The value is just going to be left at none, or just nothing in there. And then inside there, I'm going to write option 1. All right, so then I'm going to grab that. So if I save this, I can see that I've got, here's my option 1 there. So I'm going to grab that entire little div group here, starting at the form check to the ending div tag. I'm going to copy that, and below that I'm going to paste it again, and I'm just going to change that option to option 2. And after that div group, I'm going to paste it again, and I'm going to change that to being option 3, and I'm going to go ahead and disable this checkbox. So under div class form check, I'm going to change it to read disabled. Save that. And then I also need to remember on this disabled one, after the value in here, to also write disabled. I'm going to save that, and then you can see that option 3 is disabled. If you want to have your list of checkboxes appear to be in line, so lining up horizontally as instead of vertically, you will change the label on in your div with the class of form check. It's now going to read form check inline. So I'll add that inline to all of my form checks here, and then I can see that now they show up in a horizontal line. So checkboxes are something that would be used if you want to give people multiple options that they can check. If you want to limit a user to only having one option from a list of values that they can check, you would use radio buttons. So creating a radio button is a group of radio buttons is very similar to using checkboxes. Creating a list of radio buttons is very similar to creating your checkbox forms. So to go ahead and create that, I'm going to start with creating my div, and I'm going to give it a class of form check. Then within this div, I'm going to create my label, and I'm going to give that a class of form check label. Inside here, I'm going to create my input, and I'm going to set that the type is now, instead of checkbox, is going to be radio. So there's our radio button, and the class is going to be form check input. I'm going to set the value to nothing there. I'm going to leave it to being option 1. So I save that, and you can see there's my radio button. So now that I've got that, again, I'm going to just highlight the entire thing, copy it, and paste that in, change that to option 2. Paste it one more time, and make that option 3. I'm going to go ahead and disable this third option. So within my div, in that class of form checked, I'm going to write disabled. And then also within my input, I need to call out disabled. So then the last thing I need to do in my radio buttons is I need to assign them an ID, a 4 and then an ID. So within my label, I'm going to go ahead and write a 4. And I'm going to set that for option 1. I'm just going to set it to radio 1. And then within my input, I'm going to set the ID to being radio 1, because that needs to match. And the value is going to be option 1. So that I'm going to follow suit with the remainder of my checkboxes. So within my label, I need to set the 4 to being radio 2. The ID within my input field needs to be radio 2 as well. And then the value is going to be option 2. And then my last one, I'm going to go still set the label to being for radio 3. The ID is going to be radio 3, and the value is going to be option 3. And there you can see there's my radio buttons. I can switch back and forth. So if you want to make your radio buttons in line, then what you need to do is change the class again so that the form check reads form check inline. So in each of my divs here, let me adjust, today's got a little messy. So in my, I'm going to do form check inline, form check inline, and then form check inline. Save that, and that brings all my radio buttons in line. When working with Bootstrap typography, you've probably already noticed that Bootstrap 4 uses a default font size of 16 pixels and its line height is 1.5. The default font family is Helvetica New, then Helvetica, then Arial, then sans serif. So that is all the fallbacks. In addition, all paragraph elements have a margin top of 0 and a margin bottom of 1 rem. So in Bootstrap 4, they did away with top and bottom margins. It now measures everything with bottom margins alone. So be aware that that is how it's measuring your spacing. With Bootstrap, it's moving towards the idea of measuring everything in REMs, which stands for relative M. And that means that your type size is changing relatively as you scale it down and back up, as opposed to defining pixels, which is still a valid option to say 16 pixels of type. Now it's starting to become more correct to define your type size in terms of REMs, so REMs. So there are display headings that you can use in addition to your H1 tags. So let's go ahead and see what those look like. So I'm going to jump out of the end of this form here, and I'm going to go ahead and type in some of my display headings. So I'm going to create an H1 tag, and I'm going to give it the class of display1. And so this will be my display1 typeface. I'm going to save that. And so you can see display1 is much bigger. Let me give you, by example, a regular H1 heading. So you can see the difference in the size. There's your typical standard H1 heading. This is a display1. So let's go ahead and see what. So let's look at the rest of our display headings. So I'm going to create a new H1. I'm going to give it the class of display2 and call that display2. I'm going to go ahead and copy that tag here, paste that in, and change this one to display3, and then the last one being display4. And let's save that. So you can see the difference in the display headings going from the largest 4 to the smallest, but it's still larger than the H1 heading. It's in a little bit lighter Helvetica font. So these are what the display class does if you are looking for some larger display headings. Additionally, you can add in a lead class to an opening paragraph or line to make it stand out. So if I want to go ahead and do that, I'll create a paragraph tag, and I'm going to give it the class of lead. So then this paragraph stands out, and I'll put a regular paragraph next to it. This does not. Save that. So you can see that this paragraph stands out a little bit larger than the regular, the rest of this paragraph. So you can make that kind of lead into the rest of your story. And that's some of the basic additions in Bootstrap of using different classes for your typography. So more typography that you can use, something is called Font Awesome. So what Font Awesome is it's an online repository of icons. You're also able to download those. In Bootstrap 4, they replaced glyphicons, which were glyphs that you could put in with a little bit of code, with the Font Awesome icons. So to use these icons inline on your site, you have to go to fontawesome.com and click on the How to Use section. When you're in this How to Use section, you get you can use Font Awesome's free CDN. So they've got a nice free CDN that you can copy and paste into your site. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this here. That copied, jump back over into my code, scroll all the way up to the top where I have my style sheet here. I can go ahead and paste that in. There we go. And that is my link to my Font Awesome. You see there's a link to the style sheet Font Awesome right there. So that's going to link to, and I can even comment that out if I so choose here. So I can say, all right, here is the Font Awesome CDN. There we go. So I know that that's built into my site. So once I've got that link to the style sheet into my HTML document, now I can go ahead and place in all these awesome icons into my site. So if I'm trying to make a social media button on the bottom, or if I want any other icon like email us or anything else, I can select those icons and go. So let me click back in Font Awesome. I'm going to look at some of the icons that we've got. So there's a bunch of free ones. There's also some premium paid icons. So let's go ahead and say that I would like, let's take the angry face. If you had a bad day, there's your angry face. So there's a lot of options here that you can look for: solid, regular, light. Oh, this is part of Font Awesome Pro. Man. All right, let's find something else. So I can't use the Pro. That one's a Pro. But I can use the Solid. So to use my little angry face here, don't click on that button. I did that. You can click to copy some of the images here. Here's the download. Copy the HTML. Copy the Unicode. We're going to go ahead and copy that HTML. So I'm going to click and copy my angry face. It now says it's copied. I'm going to jump back over into my site here. And I'm going to go ahead and paste in that icon, hit save. And there's my little angry icon. There he is. He looks great. So if I want to, any of your glyph icons will go in line with a different style. So if I want to make them nice and big, I can set it to wrap an H1 tag all the way around this. Save that. And now he's much larger. I could also use that display that we just did and give him a class of display 1 and make him much larger. There he is. There's my angry face. So let's do one more just for some good practice. I'm going to jump back into Font Awesome. Let's go back and search my icons here. And let's go ahead and grab the Android icon. There's our Android. I'm going to go ahead and click to copy the Android. Create a new line here and just paste in my Android. And again, he's going to be really small. He's all the way down here, so I can do some adjusting to him there. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of styling to my Android. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap him in an H1 as well. I'm going to give him a class of display 1 as well, so he's nice and big for you guys to see. So I've got that H1 tag around here. I can also add in, I can change his color as well, so if I don't want him to just be a plain black, I can go ahead and within that tag, I'm going to go and put in a style tag and set the color to something else. Let's go ahead and pick a nice green. Let's pick a nice green here. Forest green. That'll be nice. Save that. And there's my green Android. So you can see it's really quick and easy to use some of these Font Awesome icons within your site. There's thousands of icons on that site, so there should be lots of options for you guys to choose from to work with. So thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for part 3 of your introduction to Bootstrap.